Welcome, everyone, to today's 4 p.m. Bible study. We are continuing our series entitled Fear Not. Now, in last week's video, we talked about finding Jesus in your storm. No matter what you're facing, no matter how difficult your situation is, you can find Jesus. He has promised his presence and his power to be with you always. That's what he has guaranteed us. Now, today, in this series, Fear Not, we're going to be looking at additional ways to overcome fear. So I want you to stick around to the end to find several additional ways to handle your fears. Our text today is going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 9. So if you have your Bibles, I want to encourage you to turn there with me, or at least follow along in the video. Now, my name is Jim Schaefer. I'm a retired pastor, and it brings me great joy to share with you God's Word. Today's passage is a familiar one. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, it contains the story of David and Goliath. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the story, but I want to take you back and look at it again, a second look at this wonderful story. So, here we go. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 9 through 11, we have this particular story. Goliath, that's the giant, stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." And then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." And on hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. You know, it's not a bad way of doing battle. Instead of everyone fighting, you choose the strongest man. The problem was the Philistines had a giant. I mean, this man towered above everyone else. And we saw in our text that the people were afraid. There was great fear. It's interesting that passage there that says great fear, the Hebrew word there is a word ma'od, and it means exceedingly or abundantly or excessively or a serious amount of fear. This is not a little bit of fear. These people were terrified, and this fear had paralyzed them. That's what fear does to us as well. Now, take a look with me just a few verses later where it says this: "For 40 days the Philistines came forward every morning and every evening, and he took his stand." So we see for 40 days these people were facing this giant, and for 40 days and 40 nights, they weren't moving forward. Fear had paralyzed them completely. You see, fear does that to us because, and here's what I think is a very, very important idea, and that is that fear is a reaction. This wasn't something they planned. This wasn't something they said, you know what, when the guy shows up, we're going to run and hide. No, when they saw him, their reaction was one of fear. Because you see, fear is a reaction, but courage is a decision. So how do we get to that point? How are we able to move forward? How are we able to overcome that fear? Well, let's get back to our story. In verse 35, here's what we read. "But David said to Saul, Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. David shows up into this story. He's only come to bring bread for his brothers, and he sees all of this happening. He sees the fear that has gripped the army of Saul. And he goes forward and he says, I'll fight him. I'll take on this giant. He says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This circumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. So, one of the things that I ask at this point in time, let me get myself back on the screen here. Here's the big question for you. Was David afraid of the bear that he encountered? Was he afraid of the lion when it attacked his father's sheep? Now, I know it's very easy for us to read these passages and assume that this is a heroic young man, that nothing causes him to be fearful. Let's put ourselves in this situation. And it's one of the mistakes I think we make when we read the Bible, is we don't insert ourselves into the story. I don't think there's any question that David was afraid of the lion, that David was afraid of the bear. He would have had the same reaction to those things that we would. Who wouldn't be afraid? David sees the same thing as everyone else. But here's the difference. David's reaction was the same, but his decision was different. His decision was different for a very simple reason. David realized something, and I think it came through years of life experience. David discovered this simple equation: God is greater than fear. God is greater than fear. Have you realized that in your own life as well? Do you see that God is greater than any fear that you could ever face? There's another way of looking at this. And again, I owe this pastor this phrase, but I love it. What others chose to accept, David chose to reject. The others looked at the giant and said, there's no way that we are able to stand against him. But David rejected that thinking. You see, what matters is not our fear. What matters is our reaction to the fear. What matters is our response, our decision. Now, here are two choices that we can do when we encounter fear, and both of them make use of the word fear, F-E-A-R. They're an acrostic, and they're very simple. We can either forget everything and run, forget everything and run, or we can face everything and rise. It's not the reaction, it's the decision. It is the courage that we have when we decide that God is greater than any of our problems. Now, there's another way of looking at this, and this comes from a book that I read a number of years ago by Susan Jeffers, and it's entitled Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. And I think this is a really great idea. Feel the fear, but do it anyways. We can't avoid fear in our life. Fear is going to come in many different ways, in many different fashions. But it's possible for us to experience the fear, to feel the fear, and then make a decision to move forward. Here's a very simple 3-step process for overcoming fear. Now, again, in this series, we're going to encounter a number of ways to overcome fear. But I like this one. I call this the ABCs to overcome fear. And it looks something like this. Number 1, or A, awareness. Stop and experience the fear. Feel the fear. Realize that fear is an emotion that is common to all of us. So feel the fear. You can't do anything about it until you acknowledge it. So first of all, feel the fear. Be aware of its presence. The second thing is to breathe. Take a breath. Feel the presence of God within you. Remember that God is greater than your fears. Remember that God cares about you. Breathe in His Spirit into your life. And finally, see, and you can take your choice here. You can choose, or you can say charge. In other words, move forward. If you want to overcome fear, experience the fear, feel it, but then choose, make a decision that you're going to move forward. Now, it may be on trembling legs, but moving forward allows God to do the miracle that is necessary in your life. Take a look here. I'm going to make a quick transition back. Imagine with me that you have a cup. And in that cup are all of your fears. And I know what you might be saying. Well, that's a ridiculous concept. My fears wouldn't fit within that cup. And yet I want to remember that Jesus, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed and he said, Lord, let this cup pass from me. He wasn't talking about a literal cup, was he? Most Bible scholars would tell you that what he was saying was, let this cup of suffering, or let this cup of fear, or let this cup of what's about to happen to me pass from me. He didn't want to have to go through the horrific death upon the cross. So what's he do? He prays and he says, Lord, let this cup pass from me. So take a moment. Imagine all of your fears within a cup. Hold it in your hand. And as you hold it in your hand, you can feel its weight. Now, it's not too heavy. You can hold it, I'm sure. But if you hold it for an hour, or 2 hours, or 24 hours, or 2 days, suddenly that cup becomes heavier and heavier and heavier. Its weight becomes substantial. And the same thing is true of our fears. The longer we hold on to them, the heavier they become, the worse they become. Now, stick with me for a moment. Now take that same cup and set it down. Place it on the table there before you. You can still see it. Its contents are still visible. You're not denying them. You're not ignoring them. You can pick up that cup of fear anytime that you desire. But once you've set it down, you've changed the relationship with the cup. It's still visible. It's still there, but you're no longer carrying its weight. You've made a decision to put it down and move forward. Without its weight, you're able to freely choose a new way of dealing with it. I think that this process is necessary if we're going to feel the fear, but not be limited by it. Practice laying down your fear. Slowly, you will begin to control that fear rather than it controlling you. And isn't that really what we're trying to do? In this life, Jesus said, you shall have tribulation. You shall have difficulties and problems. But he said, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. Difficulties and troubles will come, but we can relax. We can set down the fear. We can experience it, but we can move forward and make the decision when we realize that God is greater than our fears. Let's take a quick look here, see if I can find myself here on Facebook and see what's going on and who has joined us today. I see a number of people and a number of comments. Let's take a quick look here, see if I can. Again, I need to turn the volume down. I see that my wife is here. Jeff's here. Jeff, nice to have you. Robin Sharkey, very good, yes. He had to be, but he had the determination to not let that fear overcome him. Evelyn McGuire, it's nice to see you as well. Jean Messenger, thank you for being here. Deborah Brown Reed, I appreciate you being here as well. So we're just starting on this subject of fear. Number one, find Jesus in your storm. Number two, recognize that fear is a reaction, but courage is a decision. Make a decision that you're going to feel the fear, but we're going to move forward anyways, because we realize that God is greater than our fear. That's what David did as he faced his giant. And it's what you can do too, as you face the giants in your life. I want to encourage you to share this with a friend, continue to make comments. Thank you for being here. And again, it is such a joy to be able to share with you. I do want to encourage you to check out my YouTube channel. I am uploading more and more of our videos from previous sessions there. And I have already uploaded all of the major prophets and the minor prophets from our series on finding Jesus in the Old Testament. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and you can find a link to my YouTube channel here on Facebook. Look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless, and I'll see you then.